Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're bringing you a first look of the last Russian aircraft carrier currently in super testing. This is Tier VIII Premium Chkalov. Chkalov? Chkalov. Chkalov. Let's just go with Chkalov. I think that's right. Anyways, guys, let's have a look around this ship, right? As we noted with Pobeda over in the tech tree, this ship is entering a very, very crowded field at Tier 8. There are a lot of really good Tier 8 aircraft carriers, let's be honest. So, we've got to dig a little deep here and see what there is to see. So let's start off. I'm going to be comparing her both to her competition and a little bit over to her her sister in the tech tree, in the sense of, you shouldn't have to. I mean, you'll be able to grind that ship out regularly. Chkalov here presumably will cost doubloons or steel or something. I don't have any idea what they'll bring this ship to the game for. Probably doubloons. We'll see how it goes. Starting at the top, survivability, like we have been doing, 51,700 HP. Not too shabby. Fairly middle of the road here for a Tier 8 carrier. We noted that Pobeda was on the high end of things. She was 55 and change. Chkalov here, 51 and a half, is very comparable to Shokaku, Indomitable, Enterprise, Parsifal, Graf Zeppelin, all in about this range. Pretty typical. 25% torpedo protection you see there. Also very run-of-the-mill, very standard for the tier. Pobeda on the high end at 34%. Chkalov here, kind of scaled down in the same numbers you'd find on Kaga, Shokaku, again, Indomitable, and so on. Kind of very middle of the road. Basically, when it comes to Tier 8 carriers, torpedo protection, you have the middle of the pack, which is this 25, the high end of the pack, which is 34, that's Implacable and Pobeda, and then you have the low end, which is the Germans, Lexington, and Saipan. Basically, everybody else is kind of in the middle. Armor. If you remember, we looked at Pobeda. She was basically built on a Kronstadt class hull. She has a 30mm deck and about 100 to 125mm belt. Chkalov here, about the same. Again, with the 30mm deck, she has a perfectly symmetrical 100mm belt. You'll find both 100 mils on the starboard side and on the port side. If you remember, all the other Russian Tier 6, 8, and 10 tech tree carriers have uneven belt armors. Their belt armor is thicker to port than it is to starboard. Chkalov here does not suffer this particular problem. Other than that, there's not much to get excited about or write home about with her armor. She has 19mm extremities, except for this 21mm hanger deck. And then she does have a little bit of armor plating back here over the steering gear. But yeah, don't get shot at. You're an aircraft carrier. You will get absolutely slapped around. That's just the way it goes. Maneuverability and concealment. Maneuverability. Now, we made kind of a little bit of note about how Pobeda was among the faster Tier 8 aircraft carriers, 33.5 knots. Chkalov here, a little slower than that, firmly in the middle of the pack at 32 and change. So, I mean, a full knot slower, but still not slow. Certainly not for the tier. You're going to be able to get around the board and keep up with your team as long as you're paying attention to then reading the map and realizing that, hey, you should be keeping up with your team. 1,000-meter turning circle, 13.2 on the rudder shift. Again, nothing to get excited about here. She's big, she's fat, she's relatively quick, but she's not going to handle amazing. Don't get excited. Surface detection, 13.2 on the surface. That is wearing her rather colorful camouflage scheme here. You see in the Russian port of Novosibirsk. Full stealth rig gets her down to 10.7 on the surface. That's very comparable to her tech tree cousin, Pobeda, who gets 10.8 surface detection. Again, you're not best in tier. Best in tier still going to Shokaku, Kaga, and Saipan. This is kind of in that second echelon here. Pobeda, Chkalov, and Parsifal all coming in basically. Oh, and I'm sorry, Indomitable all coming in basically around 10.6, 10.7, 10.8. And then the high end of the range is Enterprise, Lexington, and Implacable, and then Graf Zeppelin, absolutely worst in tier at 12.7. So not super excited about, but noteworthy that she's not too bad. Remember, guys, that full surface rig does include Hidden Menace, which for the moment is still broken as hell, and you really don't want to be taking that skill for any reason. However, Wargaming has finally committed that they're going to fix that skill, I think, in the next couple of patch cycles. So if you're interested, you might want to take that in the future. AA defense, give me one sec. Let's have it peak. Here we go. All right, so we're putting up 5 flak puffs at 6 kilometers, 1540 a puff. No, 1470 a puff. Apologies. So that makes her outer bubble not quite as good as Pobeda's, but still not terrible. 1470 flak bursts are commonplace. This is standard for Lexington. This is standard for Kaga. This is basically like Kaga's outer ring, if I'm honest. You get a little more range, but it's the same potency. And then moving on in, have a look at her middle ring there. 417 DPS out to 4 kilometers. Oh, I'm sorry, 3.5 kilometers. Yep, they've changed this somewhere. I've got this listed wrong on my spreadsheet. So yeah, this is not bad. This is better than Pobeda's middle ring, which is about 100 DPS lower, but it's still not anything to get super excited about. It is kind of, I won't say it's below average. I'd say it's average. Let's call it average. There are several ships in the tier, I'm looking at you, Lexington, Parseval, and Implacable, that have absolutely punishing middle rings, and then you have, like, everybody else. And Chkalov here is everybody else. She doesn't have an inner ring, okay? So, will she shoot down planes when she's attacked? Yeah. Is the AA good enough to keep her from preventing that attack entirely? No, probably not, unless they swallow some flak at the wrong time. And then her surface artillery. Obviously, we're looking at these double-barrel 130mm mounts. Now, on Pobeda, these were actually like Grozovoy mounts, right, with the kind of advanced-looking ones. These are not. These are very obviously an earlier version of the 130mm double mount. So, nothing to get overly excited about here. You see their 6.6 kilometer range. I mean, they might hit a destroyer or two if you get into a fight, but you can't rely on them. You're going to have to rely on your air wing. All right, so now let's get to the meat and potatoes of it, kids. Let's talk about what it is that makes this ship stand out from the Tier 8 tech tree ship. Now, for starters, you have no rocket planes. Chkalov comes with the Tier 10 torpedo bombers. These Polikarpov VIT-2s, this is the same torpedo bomber mounted on Tier 10 Russian carrier Admiral Nakhimov, okay? It's the same torpedo, the same plane, the same speed, I believe. It's basically the same identical kind of thing. These planes regenerate. She got 15 on the deck. She puts up 6 in a squadron. That is different than Nakhimov. Nakhimov now, after the changes, puts up 7 at a time for her attack run. Chkalov here puts up 6, but it's the same torpedo. 5,200 damage, 41 knots of speed, 6 kilometer range with an 89-second reload. These look pretty solid. You should have a pretty solid alpha strike out of these torpedoes, okay? Let me do a quick comparison. I want to check something because the 115 knot speed stands out to me. Let's have a look. Is this worst in tier? Yes. Yes, these are the slowest torpedo planes of all Tier 8 carriers. Tied also with Pobeda, who's also 115 knots. So the Soviets get the slowest torpedo planes in the tier, but if you can make the torpedoes hit, they will hurt hard. There's a lot of alpha potential here, but you've got a lot to overcome here with that speed and the low health on her planes. You see there 1470 per plane. That is, again, worst in tier. What else do we want to talk about? Yeah, we talked about these are the Tier 10 torpedoes. So this Alpha Strike does hit harder than Pobeda's. Okay, so you've got that going for you, right? And again, as the Tier 10 variant of the aircraft, I'm not really surprised to see that. Now, what do we get instead of the attack craft? We get regular traditional dive bombers. Chkalov brings 2 different bomber squadrons to her deck. The first is a traditional dive bomber squadron here in the form of the Sukhoi Su-2. This is the same bomber that is deployed aboard Pobeda at Tier 8. So you're back to Tier 8 bombers here, okay? The difference is that these are dive bombers, okay? So Chkalov brings both dive bombers and skip bombers. Both bombers mount the exact same bomb, the FAB 500 kilogram bomb. You see there, 8,700 damage, 54 millimeters of pen, 49% fire chance, okay? The difference is, of course, the skip bombers drop from farther out. Okay, you see those planes there with a 15 on the deck, 89-second reload. This is a very comparable hit, if memory serves, to what Pobeda drops in the tech tree. I'm going to go check real quick and make sure I'm not lying to you. Yes, this is exactly the same hit and everything that Pobeda drops in the tech tree. The difference is these planes are a little 5 knots faster, okay? For whatever reason, the planes are not purely identical. They have the same health, 1310, the same bombs, the same bomb loads, the same drops, the same bomb. All of that's the same, but for some reason, Chkalov's planes are a smidge faster. Okay, whatever. Now, the regular dive bombers have the same thing. The same speed, the same bomb, the same armor penetration, the same, everything's the same reload. The difference is that these are dive bombers, not skip bombers. For the Soviets, this is a little worrisome, okay? Why are the skip bombers attractive to the Soviets? Well, for starters, your planes are so weak and fragile that you don't have to close. You can drop those bombs from, say, 5 kilometers out and then zoom out. Will you lose some planes? You probably will. Will you lose horrific numbers of planes? You probably won't. So you'll take losses, but they won't be catastrophic losses. By the time you're trying to push home a dive bomber strike with planes this weak and this slow against the likes of, let's say, an opposing battleship, you'll be lucky to get half the squadron to drop. So the dive bombers of Chkalov, in my mind, are either A, a last chance desperation weapon against a capital ship, or, more accurately, I think these are meant for actually hunting lighter targets, by which I mean kind of light cruisers and destroyers. Remember, there are quite a number of light cruisers in Tier 8 with unexceptionable AA. I'm looking at you, say, an Edinburgh. Okay, an Edinburgh taking an 8,700 point full penetration from an HE bomb will feel it. He'll be able to heal it up, yes, but he will absolutely feel it. Now, do you want to go throwing these things at, say, a heavy cruiser, say an Eugen or a Baltimore? Yeah, now it starts to get a little dicier because those guys might have defensive fire. They certainly have a better AA suite than that Edinburgh does. So I feel like the skip bombers and the torpedoes fit right in with the rest of the line. These dive bombers are going to be Chkalov's interesting weapon in the sense of, can I get them to reliably hit against a destroyer, an actively maneuvering destroyer? I don't know. I don't know the drop reticle, right? Is it elongated like an American dive bomber squadron? Is it circular like Zeppelins? I don't know, right? We have no idea. I haven't played the ship, so I can't tell you. Even if I had played the ship, I couldn't tell you. And then I feel like target selection is going to be critical. The other thing is that every single plane on this deck has an 89-second reload, okay? That really means that Chkalov doesn't lend itself to one specific kind of play over another. It's going to give her a lot of flexibility. That's nice to see, but it does mean that if, you run the risk of getting really low on one thing you could really wish you could use, and I think the dive bombers are the thing you're most likely to get deplaned on, or at least run very low of, simply because they're the most likely thing to have to drive into harm's way with this crazy, crazy low health. And then you're going to have to lean on something else. Again, the torpedo bombers, the skip bombers, they're going to make their attacks from farther away, but these dive bombers won't have that luxury. And I think you're probably going to have some dive bomber attacks against certain targets that simply won't ever survive. The entire squadron, the health of the squadron is less than 8,000 in the entire attack run. Like, that's 2 or 3 flak pups. You catch the wrong flak, you won't drop a single plane, right? So this is very much a high-risk, potentially high-reward squadron. Now, I will say that against certain battleships at Tier 8, or, remember, you're occasionally going to get Tier 6 matchmaking, this thing will be an absolute god-awful monster in Tier 6. When I start throwing these planes at a Warspite or a Dunkirk, they're going to hate my guts, right? Because I'm going to pen the bejesus out of him. I'm going to burn him to death. But when I'm bottom tier, these planes are going to feel significantly less impactful, and you're going to have to very, very carefully pick and choose your targets depending on the nature of a Tier 10 match. Anyway, guys, that's kind of your first look at very colorful Tier 8 Russian aircraft carrier Chkalov. Hope you enjoyed that. Wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.